Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Cloud and Fire. This is Season 1, Episode 3. The theme of today's episode is Seeing a Transformation. We are now 3 weeks into the season of Lent, and the question we are considering this season on Cloud and Fire is how and where are you experiencing the steadfast love of God? I would love to hear your answer to that question. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram at Cloud and Fire Pod. You can also find us on First Baptist Church in Beverly's YouTube channel. How are you experiencing God's steadfast love? And without further ado, let's get into the conversation for today.
I would like to start off with a few words of reflection from the Gospel according to Mark chapter 9. I will read verses 2 through 8 in your hearing. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up to a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who was talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud came a voice. "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. My guests today are Reverend Lisa Janes, who is a native of Richmond, Virginia, one of the best states in America. And she, like me, is an only child, so I love her already. She became interested in art at the age of 6, and becoming a visual artist became her lifelong quest. She earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts and a Master of Fine Arts from Virginia Commonwealth University. Her art career would lead to positions teaching art at the elementary school level. She was also a museum educator at the Valentine Museum of Richmond and the Children's Museum of Richmond. She's also taught art classes at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts and the Elgaba Folklore Society. She accepted her call to the ministry and was licensed at First Union Baptist Church in 2005. She received her Master of Divinity from Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology, which is at Virginia Union University. And she was ordained to the gospel ministry at Faith Community Baptist Church in 2010, where she served as the minister of Christian education from 2011 to 2015, and currently she serves as an associate pastor. She is currently the circulation supervisor at the William Smith Morton Library, which is on the campus of Union Presbyterian Seminary. She's also working on a social media project on Instagram, which is a return to her art and teaching roots. This project is called God in the Skin, and it's a blend of music, politics, social history, spirituality, and art. Her goal is to complete a book, which will be based on her experiences. And then our second guest today is Reverend Melanie C. Jones, who is a womanist ethicist, millennial preacher, and intellectual activist. She joined the Union Presbyterian Seminary faculty as the instructor of ethics, theology, and culture, and the inaugural director of the Katy Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership in the fall of 2019. She formerly served as the 2018 to 2019 Crump Visiting Professor of Black Religious Scholar in Residence at the Seminary of the Southwest in Austin, Texas, and the lecturer at Bright Divinity School, which is in Fort Worth, Texas. Her research interest probes the scripting of the body in theology and philosophy that fosters religious, cultural, and moral meaning for the present, with particular attention to Black women's body politics. Melanie engages in womanist theological ethics and sacred text, millennials and faith, and Black aesthetics and popular culture. For her distinguished research, Melanie has received notable fellowships and scholarships. She's a thinking woman of faith who embodies radical love and revolutionary justice in the academy, the church, and the global community. She's also the co-curator of Millennial Womanism, which is a digital forum, and the co-founder of the Millennial Womanism Project. As a global leader serving the professional societies and international boards, she is the chair of the board of directors for the Daughters of the African Atlantic Fund. She's a third-generation ordained Baptist preacher and a sought-after lecturer, and you can follow her online at revmelanie.com. Thank you both so much for being here. It is such an honor and privilege to be in the presence of two leading womanist thinkers. So thank you so much. What I'd love to start us off today is talking about this story of the Transfiguration and how it resonates with you personally. When you hear this story of Jesus being on the mountaintop with Peter and James and John and transforming in their midst, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear that?
You know, the earthiness of Jesus is something that is so relevant, because I think that when we think about the raiment being pure white, we have to remember that it doesn't start with the raiment, it starts with the man, or the human, or the woman. And so for me, when I think about this scripture, all of us grew up in the traditional practices of the church and what those doctrines and all those things mean. But as we continue to grow, you know, Luke 2, Jesus continued to grow in wisdom and in stature. And so God is so awesome, because God is also revealing to the disciples that you thought you knew Jesus here, but now Jesus is this and that. And so one of the things I think about is that God is continuing to reveal to us, to the church, but also to us individually, that you're not just this, but you're that. And you are continuing to grow and evolve. Don't keep your focus on the raiment. Put your focus on the humanity and the divinity that's within that humanity, because that is continuing to be birthed. And so for the church, we have to continue to embrace the gifts. I'm of Generation X, but I'm here with two millennials. And so I am learning that it took the millennial generation to birth me into this relevant part of my life. For me, it's a lot of different things, but earthiness, the earthiness, the divinity, the humanity that's in us, the God in the skin, is what, for me, equates that scripture or encompasses that scripture.
Mm-hmm.
I want to echo that. First, thank you, Reverend Jamie, for not only the introductions, the kind and warm introductions, but also the invitation to share this space with you. Like Reverend James, I have a similar kind of feeling that comes to mind when I think about Transfiguration, in terms of it being a meeting place between the divine and humanity, that this is the disciples' first exposure with the possibility to be so interconnected with glory. And so what it also reveals, I think, is this moment that we also hear later on, not just in the Gospels, but we hear more in the epistles, when Paul writes that, you know, we shall all be changed, that we shall all be transformed. Mm-hmm. And so seeing Jesus transfigured in that way is the hope of the Christian faith, that the experiences that we have here on this earth are temporal, that they are not everlasting, and that there is a greater eternity that is possible for us, that is filled with honor and glory, and that we will join and be a part of such miraculous, such amazing glory, even into the eternity. And so for me, I think the Transfiguration is a moment that we realize that Jesus, as Reverend James said, in Jesus's earthiness, in Jesus's humanity, has the possibility to be transformed into divinity, to behold, but also be embodied in such glory, which gives us hope, right, as humans, that again, our experiences, the devastation of our times and this world are only temporal, that there is something much more glorious for us to await.
I think that's so powerful what both of you have said. Reverend James, I'm going to start with what you said about the earthiness of Jesus. And I think that's something that we so often forget about, that Jesus was both fully human and fully divine. And what does that mean to you? You like you said, you have this platform online, God in the Skin. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what that means to you, for God to be in the skin, for God to be embodied, for God to be fully human and fully divine? What does that mean?
The term God in the Skin actually came from my Master of Fine Arts exhibition
Mm-hmm.
uh, as I was completing my master's at Virginia Commonwealth University. But for me, God in the Skin, I had to take off my Christian education hat, my associate pastor hat. I tell people jokingly, but it's true, this is not a come to Jesus site. It's a site where you come and you experience divinity. It may be, the music of James Brown. It may be the literature of Sonia Sanchez. It may be art. I encompass a lot of different things on God in the Skin. A lot of times I try to use certain themes because for me, Jesus, I was reminded of what T.D. Jakes said about Jesus, and I thought it was so profound. He said if Jesus could come back right now, Jesus would be a filmmaker. And I thought that was very interesting because Jesus was always uncovering the powerful narrative of what we are and who we be and what potential lay in us. Despite what the church says, despite what the community says, God is a God that wants to liberate us and bring those gifts out of us. The church is sort of like an incubator. It is a refueling station that you come to, you fellowship, you gather, you get the raiment word that you need. And then as you go out of the physical church, your gifts, whether it's literature, whether it's biology, chemistry, God is in the midst of all of those things. So God in the Skin for me actually, after the sudden death of my mother, allowed me to go back to my artist and teaching roots because I think something happens to us when we move into certain roles. We kind of abandon certain things because it may be too taboo, and then people who are in your church construct know who you are, know who I am. I mean, I laugh because my congregation knows that if a certain song comes on and it's not gospel, I love gospel, but I'm Rufus and Shaka Khan, I'm Minnie Riperton, I'm Parliament Funkadelic, I'm kind of all over. So they chuckle because they know that's who I am. And so as I continue to do God in the Skin, my pastor laughed one day because I told the person, I said, now when you come to this site, it's not going to be a come to Jesus site. And so she knew because she's aware of it. I think the reality is liberation. To be liberated in your faith means you don't abandon those things that led you to your faith. That part of me is what really led me to do the curriculum and all the things that, and of course, being in a church with a pastor, the Reverend Dr. Patricia A. Gould Champ, who has been a mentor to me in the faith at Faith Community Baptist Church, but she allowed me to develop curriculum. And in the midst of developing curriculum, that helped me to see God in the Skin.
I love what you just said. It reminds me of the work of Alice Walker, especially The Color Purple, but really all of her prose, where she's really calling us, I think, as Black women and as humans, to a different way of thinking theologically. And I know I've heard Reverend Melanie talk about this work in her work with the Millennial Womanism Project and all the Womanist Salon podcast, which we'll get to in a minute. I think that's so important. And it's so important for us right now as humans to recognize God is not in the church. God is not in the pew. God is inside of us. God is everywhere. God is in color and light and in sound. And as you stated, in the work of Black feminist musicians, Black feminist artists, God is in so much of that. God is in our hands. God is in our feet. And so I love what you're calling us, the way you're calling us to think about the very presence of God in this moment. Where do we locate God in this moment? Reverend Melanie, I heard you talking about this kind of future present into which God is calling us to live. And that's something that's really important to me. It's something I think about in my academic work on Black feminist history. What is the time and place of Black women, and what is the time and place of God in relationship to us? So can you say more about what you were saying about, this very moment in which we see God on this, or Jesus on this mountaintop transforming? Can you say more about that?
I think in terms of transfiguration and that kind of future, but that is present, that is also related to my own work in terms of always seeing that we are beholding or in process, right? That we are awaiting something that is not yet, that has yet to be revealed. But that is not a wait that is, silent or even passive. We talk about this quest towards liberation, or these kind of lofty ends, or telos in theology that we might say. And really, it is not just the ends of themselves that matter. It is not just eternity that matters, right? It is the means. It is how we get there, right? How do we live and dwell well among each other? How are we kind to our neighbor and loving of ourselves on the journey that helps us to bring about, to call into being the liberation that we seek? In this sense, the future awaits us, but that future is only predicated on what we do in the present. And the present often reminds us of what has happened in the past, that gives us either the kind of hindsight 2020, the vision to say, hey, there might be something up a little ahead because we've seen this before. Or it also might be a way of saying, in order for us not to get back there, let's try this, right? So we're always time. I believe what I'm trying to get at is that time is never linear, that we are constantly invoking the worlds to come as the worlds that were, as we are even in the present. And part of our work, I am mindful not just of the transfiguration passage, but also of this passage in Luke with the widow whose son had died. And Jesus is kind of there, kind of stopping the funeral procession and really kind of being this person who is between a world that we think has ended and a world that is still yet to come. And he's often navigating these as the kind of bearer of good news, the bearer of promise that stands between and brings these worlds together in many ways. I think that is something that Jesus calls us to, right? Is to stand between the times of what were and the times that are to come.
And I'm thinking of the work of one of your colleagues you work with on your podcast, Reverend Dr. Renita Weems, who obviously is a seminal Black womanist theologian and Bible scholar. And I think about her work showing Mary, which for those who are listening from First Baptist in Beverly, one of my sermons during Advent was based a lot around that book and the way she thinks about Mary. For those who are listening who are female-bodied people, and we don't see ourselves on that mountain necessarily with Jesus, even though we are very much there. We're those spectral figures that haven't quite come into view yet, but we're there. We know that. But I really think about the experience of Mary and other women in Scripture, Elizabeth, her cousin, and they had this experience of actively waiting for what was to come. And so I think there's something really powerful that female-bodied people really understand about what it is to actively wait. That waiting isn't about sitting and waiting on God to do something, but on actively joining God in the work that God is already doing, that God will do, that God already has done. That is part of our job to participate in that work. So I love what both of you are bringing to the table right now. Can we talk a little bit about the Linton devotional that you all put together? Because that's really what we want to point people to during this time where we're really reflecting on what it means to live through this moment, these 40 days in the wilderness with Jesus. Reverend James, maybe you can start us off and tell us a bit about the devotional that you've been working on.
Well, I just wanted to just say this. You brought up a very interesting and powerful point. Nina Simone talked about her mother. Her mother was a pastor, And they also dealt with not knowing sometimes where their next meal was going to come from. And so Nina Simone said, her mother said, I'm going to pray and God is going to provide. And so when I think about, when you talk about this whole womanism, it goes back to when I think about the Linton Guide, God led me to a womanist pastor who was also very revolutionary. But that relationship started because I taught her daughter art. How we all met was through the lens of creativity. And so creativity gave birth to this Linton Guide, but also it helped me to understand that Christian education, which now many of us now look at as faith formation, is a continuing evolutionary process where, in the words of Dr. Ann Streety Wimberly, I was very inspired, as you know, by soul stories, about story linking the biblical text to contemporary lives. That Moses is not just this person sitting in the Bible, Moses is our kin. And so for me, the Linton Guide and Sonia Sanchez and all the things that developed that curriculum came from a creative place that was outside of the physical confines of what we define as church. We as people of faith have to be readers, not only and doers of the word, but we got to learn about life outside, literature, art, politics, history. And so the Linton Guide kind of developed because I was doing all of these other subject areas on the human brain, on Alice Walker, Nelson Mandela. I was creating these curriculum pieces. They were like works of art for me. Sonia Sanchez kind of came in the midst of that. And Dr. Katie Cannon, who I would talk to from time to time about this curriculum, and I was always giving her all these samples of what I was doing. She taught me how to value my voice and how to stand in my truth and to embrace my creativity. And because it didn't fit the standard curriculum that we see today, it was almost like, where does this go? Dr. Cannon wanted to be on with the ancestors. Reverend Melanie showed up. And Reverend Melanie said, how about us doing this for the center? And I thought, oh my God. But then there was another tier, because now I had to take it outside of my church to the wider church community that didn't know me, that didn't know maybe some aspects of Sonia Sanchez. So the communication now took another level. And so now I had to take this curriculum and develop it in a way that it encompasses not only just some aspect of Sonia Sanchez, but the full aspect of Sonia Sanchez and how her life story relates to Jesus. For me, this whole Linton Guide is really a faith project, and it's also a transformation project.
Yes, it sounds like a great offering to the church and to the world right now. Reverend Melanie, Reverend James told us a little bit about your connection to this work, but why don't you tell us a bit more and also tell us where people can find this book and how you recommend that they use it during this Lenten season?
First, I think that folks ask me every time I go into churches and they have heard about womanism or even have heard about the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership. One of their first questions is, how do we utilize womanist resources in the work that we do in the church? And part of my work as the director of the center is to make those connections, is to be able to provide resources that support people in their own formation. And so partnering with Reverend Lisa in this way, we developed this curriculum that actually took about a year in the making. The early parts of the writing happened last year, but all of the functionings towards publishing and editing and graphics and all of the preparation took about a year in the making, which also was very timely, given that much of our work now is being developed online in light of COVID-19 and other realities, and that we're having to think about ways that we gather during the Lenten season to take new approaches that may look differently from the ways in which we've gathered in the past. This particular Lenten curriculum focuses, yes, on story linking, as Reverend James said, the life of Jesus also with the experiences and life of Sonia Sanchez. But what it also does is open us up to a Black woman, author, poet, right, teacher who is 86 years and counting in age. So one of our ancestor elders, and again, puts her experiences in line with one of our ancestors or elders in the frame of Jesus, puts them in direct conversation in ways that folks may not have been used to those pairings together. It also is interreligious in nature. Dr. Sanchez has identified with other faith traditions beyond Christianity. So it partners us in a way to think about that our heroes of the faith don't always fit in neat little tiny kind of denominational boxes. So again, I think the Linton Curriculum opens up multiple possibilities in terms of its framing of kind of week interaction, giving teachers and students giving a small bit of devotion throughout the week, but really taking that Lenten season to press deeper into Jesus' story and the benefit of hearing it through the lens and through the eyes and through the witness of Black women. And so that is what the curriculum does. It can be found right on our website, centerforwomanistleadership.org. There's a link directly to it. It's downloadable, it's free, it's accessible. It's very easy to use, very easy to pathway. It's a thick document in that I think it's about 70 or 80 pages, but that just shows to you how thorough this process has been for both Reverend James and myself in terms of helping to think about its publication process. And we're really excited about the product.
I was so impressed when I was clicking around online one day. I was on Instagram, and I do follow the work that Melanie does on Instagram. And I saw that all I had to do was follow, I think it was the Just Womanist account. Is that correct? And I followed that account, clicked on the link. It was there. It easily downloaded it for me. I was on my phone, so I sent it to my computer. I really have to say thank you to both of you for giving us a resource that is available and accessible to our communities, because all too often learning and thinking is something that gets siloed within the academy or behind a paywall. And I think it is so generous of both of you to offer this work, this labor of love, but also this hard work, and to make it easily accessible and readily accessible to so many people of faith to guide us through this Lenten season. This podcast series that I'm working on right now is our Steadfast Love series. And we're really thinking about how we are seeing and experiencing God's steadfast love, even through desert wilderness experiences. And so I would love to hear from each of you briefly, how and where are you experiencing God's steadfast love?
I think that for me, steadfast love right now is really embodied with the ancestors. I live in the house by myself, and I'm an only child. I have people that I do connect to, via Zoom and social distancing, and of course, my seminary community and church. But for me, the ancestors have played a very important role in this process because, the memories and the meanings and the stories of my mother and all of the ancestors have been coming back to me. Even with this COVID-19 situation, I've been thinking about the ancestors of 1918 who went through the pandemic without a vaccine. So for me, the ancestors of the Word of God, the ancestors of community, the Howard Thurman, the Fannie Lou Hamers, the people who went through all of these journeys. They speak to you, my aunts, my great uncles, my grandmother, my grandfather, who nurtured me creatively and who are now teaching me how to live through these situations. I think the ancestral pieces have been very important to me because I think that one of the things I just want to say very quickly, I think that this Lenten guide hopefully and prayerfully will help us to embrace African traditional religion in a new way. Particularly those of us of African descent. That goes back to connecting to your ancestors. The Bible embraces the the calling of the ancestors. And so we actually now have to embrace that. But for me right now, the steadfast love of their presence, of their words, of their encouragement has been really a powerful thing for me.
I would add to that, the steadfast love that I've experienced is also as we renegotiate in this season, in this midst of not just COVID, but multiple pandemics, right? The love not only of each other, but the love of ourselves as we renegotiate our time and begin to kind of discern what is most essential in our lives, what matters, right? What really matters for us, for our growth and survival, and ultimately our thriving. To pursue passions of projects of passion, to pursue projects of pleasure, to pursue things that are life-giving and life-affirming, right? I'm coming back to that sensibility that these are the greatest of these, right? In terms of this kind of concept of love. And so I see love in our ability to remain resilient, to survive even amid all of the challenges and despite the odds that we face every day. And there is a sense of love that we have to care for ourselves regardless, right? Regardless of, to not put off the care for ourselves, no matter how urgent or fierce the urgency of now is, no matter how the crisis continues to bubble up, that our care of ourselves is first, foremost, and primary.
Well, that is powerful. Thank you both so much for sharing about how you're experiencing God's steadfast love during these times. I can definitely relate to what both of you have shared. And so thank you very much. I'm sure it'll also resonate with our listeners. As we wrap up, I would love to know from both of you, you've shared how we can download the Linton Guide. But if folks are looking to connect with you or to learn more about your work, where should they go? Reverend James, we'll start with you.
I want to say you as a millennial generation have been so generous. You have let the Generation X person speak first. But actually, you can go to my Instagram page. I am at God in the Skin. There you can find out a lot more about me. Like I said, I work as a circulation supervisor at the William Swarthmore Library, but that's my day job. My night job is all the creative stuff that I do. I feel like Albert Einstein, sometimes the Swiss patent clerk, because I feel like the God in the Skin is the developmental project that is dear to my heart. And so if they can go to at God in the Skin, they can find out more about me.
Great, thank you.
I have a few places that people can go. Of course, you already read my bio. So if folks are looking to connect with me, I'm accessible on all of the social media networks at Rev Melanie J, and then my website, revmelanie.com. But if folks are looking for information about the center, which you should, which is the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership, where our mission is to cultivate pathways for whole communities for Black women, as well as to become the premier center for womanist theory and practice. You can find us at www.centerforwomanistleadership.org, on Facebook at Center for Womanist Leadership, and on Instagram and Twitter at Just Womanist. I want to also invite folks who might be listening to our kind of hallmark event that is forthcoming this spring, April 8th through the 10th, 2021. We will be having our spring conference entitled The Hinges Upon Which the Future Swings, the living legacy of womanism as a gateway to the future. We are incredibly excited because this is the conference that we really get to showcase the culmination of womanist leadership from our 6 initiatives of wares, worship, works, witness, wisdom, and worship. We get to highlight all of these, but this is really for folks who are very, very new to womanism, to folks who have been in the game quite a while. This is the place for us to connect. This year, our conference is fully virtual. Again, it emphasizes looking at womanism as it has already been around for us as a social movement for about 30 years. We're looking to ask new questions about what will its future look like and how do we participate in the formation of promising womanist futures. And so folks can go to aap.events/KGCCWL, or if you go again on any of our other networks, you should find a link very easily to register for the conference. Early bird registration ends March 1, but this is really something you will not believe. So I'm looking forward to not only experiencing the virtual conference and putting it on, but for people really learning and growing and networking together.
Wonderful. And I'm going to put links to everything that you both just shared with us in the description for this podcast so that if folks are looking to learn more, they can easily click there and see everything that you all have to offer and that you've shared with us. I want to thank both of you so much for this rich conversation about seeing a transformation. Listeners, my guests today have been Reverend Lisa James, who is from Virginia, the best state ever, and Reverend Melanie Jones, who is an incredibly gifted millennial womanist thinker, preacher, and educator. Thank you both so much for being here. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Cloud and Fire. I'm your host, Jamie Crumley. Cloud and Fire is a production of First Baptist Church in Beverly. You can find our podcast on Facebook or Instagram at Cloud and Fire Pod. Our theme music is by the talented Rebecca Silva. Until next time, be well and get home safely.